Chen was betrayed by his girlfriend and soon after tragically lost his father, surrendered to depression, and magically met his end. He wakes up one fine day and realizes that he is back. Now he promises to settle the accounts of his life. He spent a good morning in a hospital building surrounded by trees. Inside the hospital there was a very distressed girl. She was the protagonist's girlfriend named Yuchi. The girl was with a blonde man named after him. And picking it up a little while ago, the boy is holding the girl's hands above her head with his bare hands. The girl says they are in a hospital room. The guy seemed to be very impatient, asking, "What are you afraid of here?" And the quarter now that I must be vigilant so that no one dares to interfere with them. No one could enter the infirmary, and that she tries to get up, even though the persistent man is on top of it. He looked at the bed next to where the protagonist lay, saying that he was still. He also looked at the man who was unconscious and began to speak ill of him, calling him trash, crippled who can't even walk, and even if he wakes up he already knows about their relationship. After these words, the young man put his hand on the girl's face, looking into her eyes. The outrage was caused by the fact that the guy used to run him over today. So this guy felt that he simply had to have fun with the girl right in front of the protagonist to deflect the anger already. It was already dark outside. Suddenly, a bright beam flashed in the sky, illuminating the entire sky above the hospital. Immediately after that, the protagonist's eyes widened and Chen sat on his bed and was now looking at the two people who were having fun right in front of him. Familiar names flew from his lips to the Yushi. He uttered the interrogative condition, as if he didn't understand what was going on. The girl looked scared, as if she was taken by surprise, and the guy who was nearby. As it is, she looked dissatisfied, as if she had been interrupted during an important matter. He himself seems to have immediately understood that it was happening. He managed to be reborn, and today, his first day upon his arrival in Chanda. In that previous life, a lot had happened. He learned that his girlfriend and she were having an affair with that blonde-haired boy. And when he demanded an explanation, there was a push down the road, just under the wheels of a truck that was loaded to the top with the earth. The protagonist may have managed to survive, but he was permanently disabled. After the incident, his father went to the Yuan and even demanded explanations from them, but he was beaten and met his end after finding out. On top of that, Phil didn't survive the loss of his father long either. However, the heavens have not abandoned this guy. His soul, after the end of his body, was transferred to the cultivation world, where he improved for 3,000 years. During this time, he was able to reach the Marana stage and gained absolute dominance in every corner of the world. People called him the mortal of the northern sky, but despite this, past humiliations and the cruel loss of his father followed. If it is relentlessly shedding light on the darkness in your soul, it has ultimately led you to fail in your attempt to reach the stage of disaster. His body departed and his fate was cut short, and Chen, sitting on a hospital bed, said that he would never have thought that he would be reborn. Today, the day it all began, suddenly, your thoughts were interrupted by the voice of the traitors. When he got out of bed and approached the flood, pointing his finger at his face, he said that he woke up just in time, and since he is weakened, then he will have to please his girlfriend. He even wanted to show what happens to those who dare. He tramples on the one who thought of the knowledge of the highest known cultivation technique, putting the great mystery that remained in his memory. He had to work hard to heal his deficiency. The guy focused the cannon on the big one. The mystery attracts the real Kaio and ensures its circulation throughout the body. The small effort was enough to allow the first stage of the Kai's extinction status to be reached this year. The guy was focused, the energy overflowing his entire body. He was able to restore his broken bones. Now they are like new minor injuries in the legs. And everyone's opinion wasn't even worth mentioning to the Heavenly King. At that moment, his body was as good as new on the ground. They could believe what he saw. They asked him what was happening. The girl suddenly confidently said that all this time everything was fine with the protagonist, and he only decided to conspire with the doctor to win his sympathy. At that moment, a blow occurred and he cursed a slap in the girl's face, which shocked her. The guy made it very clear that he didn't need the sympathy of a woman like her. Holding her cheek where the blow was given, the girl screamed in pain, infuriating something through her mirror. He tried to attack Yushin, protecting him if he threw a punch just by looking disdainfully at the guy's hand. He thought it through when he decided to attack fully. At the same time, he retaliated by hitting the target. Since he didn't have time to recover, he bent down and writhed in pain. He was shaking. He immediately called Wang Kali, who was standing outside the door, waiting for the infirmary to enter, opening the door wide. Wang, a man whose face now. Dado burst into the room, somehow stood up, and could barely stand. Now he was by his girlfriend's side. He decided to leave each Chico Wang and ordered the big guy to finish off his rival, and Chi asked to take him to the doctor as soon as possible because he couldn't allow a scar on his face. He had a slap in the face, where, looking at the child, he clenched his fists, saying that he would regret having been born. However, immediately after this threat, the huge body of the man flying against the wall that cracked slightly in such a way, and approached with the intention of stepping on the head of the great man, declared that no one had managed to defeat the victory from the hands of the Heavenly King. In the next scene, Ekin was already walking down the street, changing his hospital clothes. The guy thought that in this life he would not allow anyone to step on him or his loved ones. No one else. Would you be able to look at them? North Portal is for the... He decided that he would not rush and would make them pay for everything they did. The car was traveling down the road. Chen was sitting. His thoughts were still occupied with what had happened and the accident that had happened today. Not only was he injured, but there was another girl there, and to avoid colliding with Enshin, he had to sharply turn the car. Finally, he crashed into a roadblock which caused him serious injuries. She was rushed to the ECU, but the doctors could do nothing. Chen arrived at his destination, got out of the car. In front of him stood a large building, the rehabilitation hospital of the city of Gyeanya. Anyway, the situation with the girl was his fault. To put these events behind us, he felt he had to check it out. Inside, 4 people were in front of the intensive care unit, 2 doctors and a man and a woman. The woman wondered aloud how this could happen. He grabbed the doctor by the clothes, and with madness in his eyes, asked him to tell him what was wrong. The doctor adjusted his glasses and replied that his daughter's condition was extreme. The injuries he received during the accident were not life-threatening, but for some unknown reason, all of his internal organs began to fail, and the results of various measuring equipment definitely say that he did not have that much time left to live. The mother, horrified, desperate, covered her mouth with her hand. After hearing the doctor's predictions, he couldn't believe his hearing that such a thing was possible. So did his father, who participated of the conversation. He turned to the doctor, telling him that he was obligated to save his daughter, and that the family thought they would pay for it as much as necessary. The doctor just shook his head from side to side. He said that he has been practicing medicine for several decades, and during that time he has managed to save a large number of lives. According to her diagnosis, even the higher powers can hardly save this little girl's life. The parents were not in themselves out of desperation. I knew what to do now and how to be. Her daughter is only 20 years old. Is there really no chance that their grieving parents will stand in front of the intensive care unit, hugging each other to find some comfort? Suddenly, they heard that if the footsteps of someone, a man, appeared in this hallway, what he said seemed ridiculous to them, because someone clearly underestimates the higher powers. That person who suddenly appeared in the hallway was Sheen. When the woman saw him, she began pointing her finger in his direction. She does. He was the man who ran out onto the road, and that's why his daughter crashed into the fence. The head of the family, Chu, realizing who this man was, also began to yell at him, because after everything he had done, he had the audacity to come here and he admitted that in fact, to some extent, he was to blame for what happened to his daughter. He had an accident because of him. The young man said that it was for this reason that the doctor who had been by his side all this time came to save his life. He lost his temper. He shouted and told Chen to get out of here, as he wouldn't listen to the nonsense of some crazy people. After that, the doctor turned to Mr. Chu and told him that his family should prepare for whatever might happen. The uncle looked frowning. Chen replied that it is impossible to imagine how many of the living were punished by this man's incompetence as a doctor. After that, he addressed the Shu family, saying that his daughter was born with a special susceptibility to cold until she was 10 years old. Every day at 3 a.m., her entire body inevitably hardened from the cold, and after 10 years, the symptoms weakened. However, his condition still persisted. He felt just as often, once every 5 days after exposing all this information, and Chen asked him if he was right. The mother was surprised at how this guy knows this information. Why is it secret? Everything he said was absolutely true, he exclaimed. No. It was now. He stood up, pointing his index finger at Mr. Chucky, the girl's father, and asked if he was willing to let him go with his daughter so that her life would be safe. The man was distraught the very moment he put both hands on Chen's shoulders, deciding to trust him completely. He repeated several times that he agreed, adding that he had the guy himself. He said that, in that case, he should go to the hospital room immediately. Chen said that he didn't like it when people were on his soul during the treatment, so he asked to wait for him outside. The boy came to the bed on which a beautiful girl was lying and unconscious. He thought it would be a pity if so much beauty was separated from his life with a slight movement. The guy touched his clothes to free his chest area. He himself hoped that there would be no complaints against him after that. Why was he doing this? For their salvation. A cloud of energy formed near his hand, with which he would heal. Girl, she put her hand on her ribcage. As you have seen, he did not possess the innate essence of cold. Someone has just used the ice parasite technique against them, and the weaker the user's body, the stronger the symptoms of frostbite. Dark energy manifested on the girl's body, a poisonous purple mark flashing on her skin. The guy reached out with his hand, grabbed the parasite, telling it to come out, and pulled his hand out. Now, this parasite was. In his hand, the guy stared at him forcefully, cutting off his fist, a purple creature whose body looked like a human. Inishin concluded that the Yixiu family must have crossed paths with someone very influential, because in order to use this technique, it is necessary to be, at least in the final stage of the K, hardening. The guy squeezed the parasite even tighter, telling it to get out of here. Due to the force used, it quickly disintegrated and disappeared, but Kaio's remains were still present in the girl. The guy waved. With the hand that was surrounded by blue energy right now, he could only remove the threat of the end of life. He would have to get rid of the ice. Kaio a little later, and Chen used the resulting energy to heal the girl. The Great Mystery Pipe is considered the highest technique of perfection. Also, the true Kai created during its perfection is one of the origins of the universe. A small amount is enough to allow the girl to survive. Suddenly, the girl came to herself. His eyes were still closed, but he began to breathe heavily. Sweat ran down her face and her cheeks reddened. Silently, he uttered only one word, hot. The protagonist touched his hair with one hand. He thought he seemed to have exaggerated a little. The cry resounded loudly. The girl had already woken up from the infirmary and had made a full recovery. Now he was covering the areas of his body, pulling the blanket over it, and staring sternly at this asking who it was. That's what he had done to her. The boy began to explain himself so as not to be belittled. He was just trying to help the girl. The girl was outraged because the boy was talking about salvation, which saves a person by taking off his clothes. His face was healing. At that moment, 3 people entered the room: mother, father, and doctor. The parents looked at their daughter with joy in their eyes. The mother began to ask if she was okay. The doctor was surprised. The parents ran to their son. The mother began to hug her. She thought she had lost her daughter forever. The father was there. The doctor took the girl's pulse. The result was surprising. He decided that it was a miracle and told the protagonist that he really was a miracle worker because the functioning of all the girl's organs was working. The doctor continued to speak, believing that he was a divine healer of his time who could cause alarm to the devil himself. After these words, the doctor fell to his knees in front of the protagonist and began, "I will apologize to him for the fact that earlier, in front of the intensive care unit, he behaved undignified and was rude to him." Chen told the man to stand up. He said there was nothing strange about the doctor not believing him because his healing methods and limits of visibility are limited. The man said she treats people like in God. Then, if Shen despised him, the doctor would like to honor him as his mentor, serving faithfully and understanding his art of healing. And Shin thought that there were very few true falls in this world, so inner alchemy would be difficult to achieve. To increase strength, it would be better to rely on external creation and alchemy. With these thoughts, did the doctor a piece of paper and told him that it was worth it to be without this ceremony. But he added that if the doctor could get the ingredients written from the leaf, then he would be ready to teach her. The doctor thanked Chen and promised, "Commit to doing everything possible to obtain all the necessary ingredients." The man added that he would have nothing to wish for if he could understand various techniques of the protagonist, even if he wasn't ready to become his mentor in the meantime. Meanwhile, the girl who was sitting on the bed turned to her mother and father with questions that she did not understand what was happening and who was the person who was in her neighborhood. The father told his story so that the daughter could find out how everything was. Sometime later, the girl realized that she was wrong, and now she stood up and thanked the boy who saved her life. She held hers. Looking with sincere gratitude, he said there was no need to thank him anyway. After these words came into action, the girl's father intervened in the conversation. He said that he would not forget what had happened until his departure, and Shen replied that he had to leave now, as nothing threatened his daughter's life. However, Mr. Cho did not insist. Chu promises to do everything possible for this young man. If he suddenly needed help in the future, he resorted to filling. Nina says that in the future she should monitor her diet and try to stay warm, avoid cold foods, and avoid colds. The smiling girl took all the advice into account and said she would remember it. In the next scene, the protagonist was already walking down the street. Suddenly, he received a call. He looked at the screen with a familiar number and answered. The voice on the other end immediately flooded the guy with questions. Why did it take so long to get to the phone? How do you feel if you have come to Gianna and seen Yuxi? Cham apologized to her father and then told him that she had found Chi, but that he had already broken up with her. The father said that his son thinks that this girl doesn't suit him, so he shouldn't force himself, but Chen still needs to get in order as soon as possible. You don't have to get discouraged after a failure. After that, his father seemed to remember something, that he should have taken the time to visit his uncle Dan and Aunt Wang, because they took great care of him when he was still a child. The protagonist asked his father not to worry and said that he would definitely visit his uncle and aunt in his previous life. He never listened and stubbornly insisted on being together with Liu Yoshi, and that's what all this led to a disaster. After 3,000 years, Yushin was happy that he was finally able to hear his father's voice in his previous life again. She stubbornly ignored the collapse of her old man, but now, after listening to it, he really feels like he's gotten a lot closer. Inchim's little task was to go to the uncle and aunt's house in the past life. His Aunt Wang was very kind to Shenjin. Now, after 3,000 years, he will finally be able to express his gratitude to her. The guy had several packages and there was a group of men nearby. They didn't look friendly, more like bandits. They had bats in their hands. One of the men briefly informed the others that they were already where they needed to be. He told his brother. That woman where? On the top floor of apartment 303. She also told everyone to remember that Lang has no money, so they must take all the interest from her, otherwise they will have to answer to their brother. After listening to everything that was said, Chen concluded that apparently these people would cause trouble for his aunt. She went straight back to the men, asking them a question. Did the man with the scar on her face decide that this guy was an acquaintance of Wang who decided to take care of her? He said if he decided to get out of this. If so, you should prepare properly immediately, as Wang owes them 500,000. According to him, If they do not succeed today, not only will women's families be included in the distribution, but each of them will go into debt. The guy wasn't happy with what was happening to his foot. He punched the thug and flew to the side, to the surprised looks of his companions. Suddenly, the others began to become anxious towards Brother Joe, who fell directly into a trash can, from which several riots came out. Missing, the boys flew in different directions. Afterward, Dasun told the other men at no cost that if they left now, they could do it on their own. The protagonist stood in front of the door of the apartment and began to play. The woman opened the door and started a conversation between them inside the apartment. She recognizes him immediately. Mr. Chen then asked her how she had ended up in Zheng. The boy said that he came to this city for an internship and at the same time decided to visit her and her uncle. The aunt said that Sheen rarely visits them. She wanted to cook her favorite dishes. In another room, Uncle Dan was sitting on the couch with a newspaper in his hands and turned to him to see who was coming to visit them. The man immediately put down the newspaper and stood up, inviting the proteges to sit down and talk about how long it had been since they had last seen each other, handing the protagonist a cup of tea. The uncle asked him how his father was doing. The boy replied that his father works in a factory. The uncle was surprised that after so many years, Chen's father still works there. After that, Dan began to talk about the fact that the family is not doing well, so the boy should start working hard to earn more to ease his father's burden. The man also shared that he himself had already opened his own business in Xingyu during 10. Chen, drinking tea, briefly agreed with what his uncle was saying, but the man did not like this reaction of Aichin. All the dissatisfaction with the young man was reflected in this man's face. The elders are trying to share their experience. According to Dan, you shouldn't expect a huge success. Suddenly, a little girl appeared in the room, turned to her father, and asked him who this person was. The man said he was the son of a former neighbor and that he came to work. The girl said that she no longer remembers anything and that she herself took an apple and took a bite of it. I thought most of the time, suddenly it was to be expected that he would come here just to ask his family for help. Sometime later, the four of them were already seated at the table. Uncle Dan asked Chen to quickly evaluate his aunt's masterpieces and tell him what he thinks about them after all these years, and she is still an amazing cook. His thoughts were obstructed by the fact that he needed to test everything correctly. Why hadn't he eaten his aunt's Dutch daughter in 3,000 years? She was convinced that the young man was selfish, and that it would not take a few minutes for him to ask for something. Suddenly, Uncle Wang, handing each of them a treat, asked him if he had a girlfriend. He gave a negative answer. Don't you have a girlfriend? The woman said that everything went well. Did she decide? Chen probably didn't know. From this, however, in the past she and her father had arranged a marriage between him and his daughter, the girl Linxia. Hearing this, he chokes on his food and then gets up. She began to get indignant. What kind of contract can we talk about? Did the girl think that this guy had come here to ask about the family? Apparently to his soul, such thoughts were now in his head. They wonder what century they live in. Does this man still care about the remains of the Middle Ages? And Chen asked his aunt if she had made a mistake because her father had never mentioned it. The woman said they had planned to report this when he received his diploma, but who knew it would end? Suddenly, he thought it was a great coincidence, said the girl. Mothers who were not in the Middle Ages. Now people choose who to love. After these words, he became angry with the fleet, saying that they consider themselves a grown man. But instead of making an effort, he will find a wife who will rely on this retrograde custom. Aunt Wang was angry. He asked his daughter sternly, how dare he talk to such a guest and where were his manners? The girl, indignant, asked her mother why she was protecting this child, and angry. He said he'd eaten this Uncle Dan already, got up from the table and lit a cigarette. After that, he asked Chen to step back for a moment. He accepted immediately. When they left, Uncle Dan said he had said it all. Now Yeshim's family was poor, but the people in his position could not afford the lack of determination. According to the uncle, he should think about how to make an effort and start making money and not try to start a family. After these words, the man handed a card to the protagonist, saying that there were 10000 in it. Considering that his family had a good relationship with the ancient, then he can consider it a financial help. Uncle Delaware asked to forget the agreement about the marriage with the Li Shi prostesses. Man probably misunderstood something, because the boy himself had no idea about this marriage. He wouldn't have found out if Wang hadn't told him and Chen hadn't. Take it seriously. After this said that he had just arrived in Yang, there were still a lot of things waiting for him. He promised to see him again when he settled here. Dan called the fleet and advised them to make an effort to improve his family's situation. She handed him the card he received and told his uncle that he would visit them again when there was time, and also said that if they had any difficulties they could contact him. He would definitely try his best to help Lost Shi. Wang said that Chen had grown up very well, looked at the card and thought about what Chen meant by that. She assumed he knew her debt. Then the woman decided that the boy was only taking care of her. A car was speeding down the road. Then a huge man got out. He had scars on his face. He addressed his subordinates, telling them that they couldn't pay off an unfortunate debt. Instead of spending time with them, he should have spent time lifting docks. After the man asked, "What the hell happened here?" The bandits, beaten, were sitting on their knees in front of their brother. One of them said it wasn't his joint, because the guy they met really knows how to fight. He knocked him down. The brother began to curse obscenities from his subordinates. He even kicked one and then asked where the boy they were talking about was. It was at that moment when someone's voice suddenly appeared. "I am the protagonist." He asked the man if he was looking for him, the brother whose gang everyone supported. He hopes that he will overcome it now, the brother who is taking over the case himself, so they were confident of success. Approaching the boy's brother, he told him that he was no longer a tenant, and then turned to the little boy, telling him that in all these years, he was the first who dared to meet him. Waving his fist, the big guy pounced on the guy with the intention of hitting him, putting all his strength into him. Chen's face showed. After the incident, the brother, whose gang was anxiously watching what was happening, happy smiles flashed on their faces. They were happy because they thought that after such a blow, the boy's roof had been torn off. The men were sure that in terms of strength and speed, their brother, who was almost on par with the boxers' heavyweight professionals after his punch, this little guy definitely wouldn't recover. However, a smile soon appeared in abundance. Right off the bat, he quickly found himself behind this big guy, and didn't have time to sensitize himself. The guy pressed 2 fingers at one point, armpit area, which made him howl from the pain that was going through him. He screamed that it hurt. His gang members watching from the sidelines were surprised that their brother, who had received the man's hand, was trembling. He stretched out his hand with his other hand. The prosthesis moved again at high speed, and he was about to repeat his pimento, while the brother who looked at Danger approached in horror. I missed with bulging eyes and thought that I couldn't even imagine that this guy would become a master among masters. He is truly a warrior. Man has already realized that yes, it turned out that his path will end right here. He looked straight ahead. Fear was visible in his eyes. His fingers froze millimeters from the bandit's neck. Sweat ran down his chin. He froze as if he was afraid to move. Who wondered why this guy stopped and didn't finish them. After that, Chen put it on hands, pockets, and asked if anyone was ready to talk. Now, the brother stammered and thanked Chen for not murdering him. The thug called out to the guy, "Sir," after he added that Chen's debt, including interest, could not be paid in this way. However, the brother tried to apologize, and Chen said that he would pay back exactly what he had borrowed. This is the beginning now. He wondered why his aunt had gone into so much debt. First, she found out from the thief, who told her that her company had debts and that she needed money to pay off that debt. Today I saw the bandit, the protagonist. Now I was interested in something else. Here he is very needed in the Blue Star. Logically, the warriors do not appear only here. It was worth knowing more about it, and he reminded those who have just called him a warrior that contrary to those words, he is not. However, he has some interest in them. The guy asked him to tell him a little more about warriors. Lichi passed by with a trash bag and didn't see him talking to a ban. Guido and thought he could still understand his desire to become a man, but knowing punks is too much. In his opinion, sooner or later, this guy will definitely be behind bars. He was ready to answer Yushin's question. He said he would tell you everything, but he didn't know much about warriors. After the conversation, the entire brother class wished the boy a safe trip. They conversed in a friendly and courteous manner, having already turned their backs on each of them. One of the thugs turned to his brother with, "Question. This guy certainly knows how to fight very well, but that's one of the reasons why you are so nice to him." Another bully agreed with this, explaining that these are far from the times when skills decide everything. "In the worst case, you can call about 100 people and teach them a lesson." He replied that I didn't understand anything at all because his hunches were correct. So this guy was just like Mr. Sanchez's brother. Lee, who is all the leading boss in a low point, has already looked and asked if this kid, another, could be placed on an equal footing with Mr. Lee. Meanwhile, the protagonist thought about what he had learned from Shango. According to him, martial artists, that is, the warriors of this world, are divided into visible power warriors, hidden power warriors, creative power warriors, and great masters, and Chen was floating in the air, surrounded by energy. And you meditate, how far can you? Growers in the 4th stage of Doc hardening are equated with a visible strength warrior. There are only 9 stages on the path to perfection. The first stage is the hardening of the fall, the second is the laying of the foundation, the third is the golden elixir, the fourth is the primordial spirit, the 5th stage is the dissolution of spirit, the 6th is the knowledge of emptiness, the merging of sensation, the 8th is Mahayana, and finally, the 9th is a disaster. Even though in the past they managed to reach the 8th Mahayana stage, now they have to start again from the beginning. However, thanks to your past experience in the canon of the Great Mystery, the path to perfection will not present you with difficulties. Now, he was on his way who thought that in just 1 hour he managed to reach the 4th stage of Kaio. The guy believed that, in any case, the hardest part is the beginning. Once the doctor receives the right ingredients, Chen can begin creating a lister. His own phone, called Shou Bing Yu, rang and he immediately introduced himself. Asked the boy if she had business dealings with him. The girl suggested that since Chen had recently arrived in this city, it probably wouldn't be very convenient for him to rent a house. And that's why he said that it just so happened that his family had just vacated an apartment, and if he didn't mind, he could live there for a while. It was all really as Chu said, because Flood was ready to accept his goodwill. He asked the girl to send him the address where he could drive at the time to find her, and when he would find her, he could take the chill out of the girl's body. At the meeting, Chu asked the protagonist if he liked this place. He replied that, to be honest, unpretentious when it comes to housing. The girl hesitated for a moment and then asked when Chen was going to take the icy dock away from her. The boy said it could be done now, but for that the girl would have to take off her clothes. Wherein, at that time, a girl who was behind these people unintentionally witnessed this dialogue. Chu was confused when she was instructed to undress. She started asking again and pulled her blouse down a little, revealing her left side. After that, he asked her if she needed to undress completely. The same girl who was jogging was surprised at what they were doing in broad daylight. That's what rich people do in their spare time? It seemed to him that this was too much. Strange. So she ran out of here, and Shin asked her what the girl was thinking and told her that everything would be exactly the same as last time, but that it was not worth doing it on the street. You have to enter the house first. Once in the house, they started the treatment and Chen was catching Chu's cold. He was focused on completing his task. The girl, sitting across from the boy, thought she had no ulterior motives and also how hot her hands were. He soon informed the girl that the cold fall on her body had been removed so that she could return home. She thanked him and informed him that his father was hosting a banquet at the Palace of the Full Moon in the morning. The members, the Chu family, hoped that the protagonist could participate in it. With these words, she handed him the invitation. He understood everything and accepted the invitation. From the girl's hands, it was already dark outside. Chen stood admiring the surroundings. After having been here for half a day, he realized that this is a very good place and the peak of years here, only full of spirit spring. He began to think that he could set up a kayak selection formation and take this house as a center. Suddenly, his thoughts disappeared. I hope it was happening in one of the windows. His attention was completely directed there. He wondered what was going on there. Silhouettes of several people were seen, including a man with a camera, two men holding a girl he recognized. It seems that this is the girl he saw today. However, it seemed to him that there was clearly something wrong with her. The girl, whose name was called Kiwi, was unconscious. The man who addressed her asked, "Why didn't she do it?" He appreciated the kind attitude and forced him to use force. The man looked at her as if he was distressed and said that he couldn't even count how many stars on her had slept with him, and she is still pretending to be a fool. While the girl was lying on the bed, Chief Fendi was talking to his henchmen. They asked him if they would let him have a little fun with this girl when he himself finished enjoying her. The man laughed, but agreed, saying that everyone can have fun afterwards. Instead, he ordered the cameras to be installed quickly. I wanted to see if he dared to disobey them when he had their photos in his hands. The man with the camera replied to the manager that everything would be done. One of the guards wanted to close the window with curtains, but provided a man who clearly saw everything that was happening full, he said. As soon as he realized something was wrong, he went funky, saying that there was someone outside, and that person had seen them. The manager got angry. He ordered the man to be apprehended immediately, brought before him, as he would have to pay for his silence. After those words, he thought about it. He had a better idea. It would be better to just annihilate this man, a fanatic of his guards, who, when the job was done, would pay 100,000 to each of them, so that they would have a chance to lie down until it all happened. One of the subordinates said he would do anything as a boss. Suddenly, he cursed the house, breaking the glass. When he was in the room, he started talking about how these guys drugged girls and now they decided to go for murder. I didn't even know if it was possible to go even lower. Did they really think I hadn't heard anything? It was obvious that these people weren't doing this for the first time, and they weren't afraid at all. The subordinates of the fanatical boss began to wonder, how did this guy get here? The manager said that there was nothing from Temur, that this guy just did a trick with a rope, as happens in him. 7, pointing his finger at the uninvited guest, Fenger ordered him to be silenced because no one should know what happened here. The guards pounced on the guy. One of them said that if he wanted to blame someone else for what had happened, then he should blame his nose. Interestingly, both had knives in their hands. The fleet said that, as the two wanted to go to base so badly, and they helped us. Fragments of broken glass, suspended in the air, swung his legs, sending these fragments directly. Prepare your opponents. They hit the target, hitting the necks of 3 men. The men fell to the ground, their necks filled with red liquid, and their heads. Fan was confused and not knowing what to do. The protagonist approached the man, telling him that it was his turn. Now it's clear the funk is already sitting on the ground. The man, stuttering, began to beg for mercy, begging him not to. Rooster, and then said that serious people were chasing him, so if he got hurt, he would get into big trouble. He was ready to give the guy everything he has, just to keep him alive. However, the plea did not help. Aishim's foot hit the man, who flew against the wall, hitting his head. There was a stain of red liquid on the wallpaper. Shards of glass were trapped in the body. Fandit had left the base. The protagonist looked around. Now he was thinking, how would he deal with the bodies now? If you don't take care of everything now, you can bring problems in the future. The voice of the woman I am. The girl said it was hot. As soon as the girl came to, she took her head, and when she opened her eyes, she saw an unknown man in front of her. Then he got scared and began to ask him who he was and what he was doing at home. But now she remembered him. She was angry, cursing, because she decided that he took advantage of her. The fact that she was drunk followed her home to smear her. I wanted to call the police to arrest the guy. The girl didn't hide her intentions right away. She said she would, so she was about to walk away, but with the sudden movement of her hand, the boy gave her a light tap so that the girl could sleep a little longer. He cowed her again. If I saw the lifeless men, it would be very embarrassing to explain it to her as well. Since he became involved in this matter, he felt that he needed to put an end to it. He picked up the phone and called Shuma, saying he had a delicate problem, so he needed his help. Shuma immediately realized that the man had called him Caritas to come to the NGO's property. After a while, the job was done. Lead informed them that they had finished ordering. Now they were about to do so. Going out, and Chen agreed, leaving Zir. When Oi regained consciousness, he held his head and complained of headache, wondering what had happened. The protagonist was already there, told her that she had been drugged with something, and went there. According to him, his headache is a consequence of taking an aphrodisiac. It should pass soon. The girl was not delighted. On the contrary, she got angry and did not believe it. It seemed obvious to her that it was he who was following her. And also that he was plotting badly against her, and Chen said that it was up to her to believe him or not. The girl closed her eyes and thought that it seemed like an action to her. This guy also behaves like this, and differently. Maybe he really made a mistake on his account. He began to remember everything that had happened to him before. He wondered where the fungus had gone. He remembered if he had gone to the past. Because of the zeal with which he insisted on taking her home, was it the funk boss who doped her? All that came to my mind now was cursing this man. After that, the girl's attention was attracted by the camera she is on. I was in the living room. It's possible that the camera was on and telling you to capture some of what was happening in this room. Thinking about seeing the camera footage, she was crying and angry, but now she knew for sure that the person drugging her was actually Funk. Iksham's images did not go unnoticed either. The girl interrupted the recording of the video at the moment when the boy who saved her and watched in horror, covering his mouth with his hand, and also wondered if a person was capable of such a thing. It was dark outside, it was raining and lightning was shining, and Chen's hut was engaged in cultivation, concentrating entirely on his business. He thought Gaia's spiritual abundance was fine. If he had stayed in the same place, he would have only been able to strengthen this stage after 10 days. Then, in combination with the formation of downward absorption, you will be able to quickly complete the purification of the body and reach the final stage. In his previous life, he failed to reach the 9th stage, disaster. In addition to the incipient darkness of his soul, one of the reasons for his failure was his excessive haste. Very fast growth leads to the instability of the foundation in this life. It is necessary to prepare the foundation first. Suddenly, someone rang the doorbell. When it was time to open it, a little girl was in the rain. She asked what to do. I was doing here, if anything had happened. To which William replied that a world of rain was falling outside, and that it was thundering. Also, because of what happened recently, she was a little scared, so she asked if she could stay at her house tonight. The boy, with a slight smile, asked her if the girl was afraid to take the Stockhawker hesitatingly. The girl said she had seen the recording in bed. Right after that, he said he still had to shoot tomorrow, that he would leave at dawn and not be bothered anymore. Chen agreed, took her inside the house, and she immediately thanked him, adding that he was actually a very good person. Some time passed. The girl had already managed to take a shower, and now she started a conversation with Chen. It was her first time in this house. The family found out that she used it to receive important guests, and she did not agree to sell it to anyone. He said he hadn't thought about who yet. I would be able to buy that house, right? The young man explains that he did not buy this house, he only helped the family. He was somewhat surprised, and they offered to live here for a while, as a sign of gratitude. When the two of them arrived in the room, Chen came in lying on the bed and said that if the girl was going to sleep here, then she should refrain from making noise. She accepted this condition. Now the two of them were lying in bed. She looked at him and thought that being next to this guy, it feels difficult to explain what she feels. Calm down. Suddenly the girl told her she was wrong. After those words, she apologized. The boy replied that everything was fine, but the girl couldn't sleep. He turned to Exenhill. Looking at him, he asked if he was a murderer, judging by the way the boy moved. He concluded that he had received some kind of training after she asked him how he managed to climb such a distance. Everything seemed incredible to him. It only made the sound of one person. The girl was a little upset that the guy fell asleep like this by a murderer. He looked so careless. In the morning, Aichi woke up and found that the girl had left at dawn. As she said, he thought it seemed like being a star wasn't an easy thing. She also had to go to work at the company, where she is doing an internship. After all, living a worldly life requires having a proper position. He was already getting ready when he realized that the girl had already prepared breakfast. There was still a note where I wanted to thank the neighbor for his kindness, and I promised to find a way to thank him. He also left her his phone number, which he could call at any time. The heart was drawn on the sheet and a lipstick mark was left in the form of a kiss. According to the Ancient, this girl is quite persistent. The entire food company building had arrived at the planning department, where I was supposed to do an internship. He was kindly informed about it. This gratefully accepted the information and prepared to begin performing his duties, but not very pleasant. Not very good rumors about him have already begun to circulate in the department. They said he was Lisha's boyfriend. It turns out that he was still a beast. One of the girls said she would never have thought that a person with that appearance would be prone to violence. Another girl agreed and then reported that she met the beautiful Che, and in the morning he had a gas bandage on his face and said that he was the one who burned it with the cigarette. No one expected a good girl like Yuchu to have such bad luck with the young man. One girl said she should have left him a long time ago. He is just a mediocre who has no money or influence. And now he has also raised his hand against her. Someone like him is not worthy to be around a good girl. This girl had a completely different opinion of the protagonist, a guy the last time she took him to work on a Porsche, so he's definitely a very good choice. In addition, his father is in the senior management of the Municipal Ministry of Public Education. Same. A well-educated person, unlike that loser according to this girl, was definitely the one. Trustworthy. And she told Penny not to. That's because she and the prosthetics are friends. Penny didn't give up. He couldn't believe that after everything he had been through, Chan had the audacity to come here as if nothing had happened. He decided to tell him everything he thought and everything he had accumulated. The guy was sitting at his desk, not paying attention to how to settle in. Has the increase changed and the fact that now everyone is actively arguing, clarifying their name? She folded her arms over his chest and asked him if he understood the fate of a loser and a beggar, how he was with her, and how she finally decided to treat him. If Chilla hadn't shown up with a bandage on its face, no one would know how much it has to endure while in this relationship. Penny, pointing to this, asked if it had been seen if he thought he was worthy of being with a girl as good as Yuxi. The guy asked them if they were really so sincere that they hadn't yet realized that they were just a tool in the hands of that fallen woman. She was thinking about it, even before she had time to acknowledge the office leaks, and she had already managed to create an unfortunate victim image for herself. He found it incredible how far he was straying from his path, and the she turned into ᴄᴏᴘᴘύʀɪ₦ᴜ. Saying that he was beating her and spending his money, she asked him why he insulted his friends since the first day of work, which he managed to find with such difficulty. She said that she really hoped the boy could change and improve, then asked him if he really, in his opinion, deserves nothing but insults in his speech. Everyone in this department now considered this unusual guy petty, insensitive. Suddenly, at that moment, a man in a suit entered the apartment. Asked for what? Everybody was here. Did they really have nothing else to do in the workplace? Tim Khan, the director of the planning department, appeared and asked Chico what the topic was and why his eyes were full of tears. So he approached the girl who was crying and asked her what was wrong with her face, and in the sheety of her guardian, that it was good. He began to whisper in the director's ear, telling him what had happened here. He seemed to frown. The director thought that if he tried foreigners' ants without hindering their work, it would make them feel even more embarrassed, so she would finally break up with him. She would later change Mr. Ivo, even though she was not Ivanixi's girlfriend. Thanks to his connections with the young master, he was able to successfully negotiate many matters of his planning department. Director Tim Khan believed that if Shenzhen read that they are officially together as a couple in the future, then it could bring him even more benefits. Apartment and for the company? If this happens, your department's accomplishments will grow by leaps and bounds for the sake of the departments. The director decided that it was necessary to put an end to this stuffing. He turned to the protagonist saying that he had just found out what was going on between him and she. According to him, he didn't expect this and didn't think that a girl as talented as her would link her fate to such a thing. Chen seriously asked the director what he meant by talking about talent, ability to trust someone else's connections. The other employees were shocked. How dare this guy talk like that to his management? Could it be that he doesn't really know what decency is? They considered his behavior to be shameful and undignified. Chinkin raised his hand, letting the employees know to be quiet. Now, everyone calms down immediately, and the director extends his hands to his sides and tells the guy that he was a stranger, so that he would not interfere in Chinish's personal affairs. However, as of today, Chen is an intern in the planning department, so he is expected to meet certain requirements regarding his work at the company. He explained that Chi had only joined them for a month and had already achieved some success, which was why he spoke so highly of her. In fact, your department has requirements for each employee regarding the performance of their duties. If the Proton doesn't comply, then he shouldn't blame the Guardian when he forces him out of here, and Shin replied with a smile. Being a young man of luxury, he could not back down. The boy said this because he only wanted to force him to raise the issue of their separation, because that way she could preserve her reputation and start openly dating Chi. I read Chi, started yelling at him, called him stupid and asked him if he was doing it for the better. He then said that he would come when someone like him could take over the assigned task. Chin told Chen to pay attention to how Chico trusted him. In this case, he decided, with a clear conscience, to entrust a new employee with a task that requires firmness of character. He stood still and smiled. She told the director that she was sure she would be able to cope with the situation. Tim said that one of the main directions of the planning department's work is to develop companies, but at the moment there is a lack of a person responsible for creating their favorable image. That is, the face of the employees will be the company. According to him, that he tried to negotiate. I've worked with artists or with famous people on the internet, but no one has been able to come to terms with people who are suitable for this role. Even the she couldn't complete this task, she couldn't bear it either. The director said that since he believes he has more remarkable abilities than leaving Hoshi, he will be assigned that task this time. Director Chen took each one in only 3 days to complete it, so it seemed like they found the artist. It was very easy, PM said unworthy. Nothing in which blind trust of this guy was simply disheartening. According to the girl, she has been working here for 3 years, but she has yet to see a newcomer who can carry out these negotiations and come to an agreement. So why does this guy think this task is a simple thing? Another employee, the one behind the penis sign, said that it was the first time he had seen such a limited fool. Prostheses with the family number. She immediately introduced herself to her neighbor to understand who was talking to her. Now, her neighbor answers, a little hesitantly. And the guy said that he was now in the planning department of the company, and that he would like to discuss the topic of cooperation with her without any questions that he told him would come to him. At one point, the protagonist, after finishing the conversation, told his colleagues that the person he had contacted would be arriving soon. One of the employees asked if the guy really kept the performers for his subordinates. One girl didn't like that. He decided that the guy clearly had some sort of hallucination where he should see a doctor as soon as possible. Another girl said this was just funny. He had never found himself like this. Both of them made fun of him. Pen, frowning, said that the guy clearly knows how to pretend. I know you, Shin. In his opinion, it should be separated, or as fast as possible. Lu said he didn't expect this guy to be a kid either. Behaved like this. She needed to convince him, so she took the boy by the hand and guided him, asking him to walk away with her for 1 minute. This man, they were alone. The girl started talking about why she called him. She said that Shen used to be very nice to her, so why can't he think of her for her well-being now? According to her, a wonderful future awaits her in this company. If they find out here that she betrayed him, how will she work here in the future? She asked him if he could break up with her. The proto-prince stood in front of the girl, his arms folded over his chest. He was a little amused by the fact that he was serious, asked to protect his reputation, proposed separating. After she left herself, the girl lost her temper and began to ask him if he thought he himself had not made a single mistake. If you think that what happened is not your fault. According to her, if he had not been so poor, she would not have deceived him. And she said that if he really loves her, then for her sake he should. The girl didn't have time to finish because the boy punched the wall near her. His fragments of the wall flew in different directions. The girl's eyes widened. She was scared and wanted to say something, but he interrupted her by telling her that after all his wickedness, she shouldn't even dream that he would do anything for her good. On the wall of the place where the blow was given, there was a large fist marking the wall. He told her to remember one thing, that it wasn't worth it, he said in the future. The girl would hardly try not to bother him anymore, because otherwise she would really make him understand the meaning of the word repentance. Eox was looking at the guy's back, her body trembling because she was scared. After that, the girl quickly shouted that this wasn't the end if the boy was going to complicate her life, so she would pay him in exactly the same way, and she said that it would tarnish her reputation. The star who invited the event arrived, and Shiji was already in the company of Penny, who asked him about his conversation with Chen Li. The shift pretended to shed tears and say that he couldn't imagine that this guy would change. So pleased was she with the decision to part ways with Ekin, that she informed her colleague of it. Pen called the good girl. Why did she have to break up with this boy for a long time? Penny told him to follow his advice and start dating young Mr. Evan, because he is much better for her than Chen. Suddenly, exclamations could be heard from the front row of the apartment. She herself was accompanied by guards. Authorities said they received a visit from Astro they admired. Everyone recognized immediately. He was a popular celebrity, but they didn't understand what business could bring him here. Among the employees were his fans. The girl took off her glasses and began to look closely. The director he immediately walked up to the girl, smiled and looked friendly, and then said that he was the director of the planning department of this company. He asked him what he had brought here so suddenly, if it was possible that he would discuss cooperation with them. Then and she briefly agreed with what was said. She really is here to cooperate. Tim Campan thought this Aelon star should be here because the director worked on it after his consent. Tim Khan asks again about the seriousness of his intentions, and then said that in this case they should go to his office to discuss everything in detail there. But the girl looked in a completely different direction and didn't listen to the principal's words. It seemed not to be good. They are upon him, and the happy director can only think that if he could sign a contract with such a famous artist, his bonuses would double. He felt that he simply had to take advantage of this opportunity that was given to him. However, when he realized that he was searching, he walked past the principal, called the girl, but she had already found her goal. He approached the protagonist and put his hand on his shoulder to let him know of his arrival, asked him with a smile if he was coming quickly, and what he would say. The guy turned his head slightly in her direction, smiling in response. He briefly said that she had arrived just in time and that Shikali had a friendly conversation. The guy told the star that he lacked a person who would be in charge of creating a favorable image. He asked if the girl would like to become the face of his company. Smiling and holding sunglasses in her hands, he immediately agreed to Tinkin's proposal. Now she realized that Miss Anne wasn't the only one who had been able to do it. Quid had been invited by the Ensign, which surprised him greatly. Dad, He stood next to her with an angry expression on his face, just when the others couldn't believe that Star had simply accepted the fleet's proposal, and she said that this couldn't be true. He wondered why he didn't know that Chen was familiar with the star of this caliber. Then the girl remembered that, when Chen called Kiwi, he called her his neighbor. In response to Uki's words, he said that it was apparently possible. Suddenly, he thought they say some stars decided to specify, practically living in cheap houses to avoid unnecessary attention from the paparazzi. In his opinion, the boy from Bello was lucky, since he rented a house next to such a star. He raised his hand and turned to Director Tim, informing him that the problem with the company's face had been resolved. The only thing left is to discuss the amount. The director, who was suddenly captivated when it came to money. He said the company's budget for this targeting is only a few, not 1,000. For such an advanced star, what would Oi look like? Next to nothing. The Proton watched in silence. Then came the glow. She put her hands at her sides and began to resent the fact that the director only asked her to find an ordinary artist and invited me to go to the A-list star here. Ever wondered if your company could afford these services? He calmly said that today he was his. Shift. So you didn't know that your company wasn't right in that suddenly stated that even though your representation fee is actually very high and starts at 500,000, you won't require the company to pay you. Everyone was surprised by this turn of events, as she herself agreed to cooperate without charging anything. The girl explained this by saying that she doesn't feel sorry for the unfortunate 500,000 if it is the etching job. She said that the other employees should consider it on its merit. He had all the other problems solved with his assistant. Try it, and it was time for him to go off and have lunch. Surprised, Chinkin agreed with what was said, dismissing the two of them for lunch, and Chai thanked him for coming here at company time, and then invited her to lunch, saying that this time he was treating the girl who was following him modestly. She said that she should treat him because he saved his life. The headmaster hadn't recovered from the shock yet. Why was the lady with Flood sure that this guy had cheated here with his tricks? Why wouldn't it be difficult for a man like him to cheat on a girl? Lee hissed furiously, hey? He thought about how audacious he was to accuse her of cheating on her, because it seemed obvious that he was the first to cheat on a girl. How come the AI, in your opinion, couldn't see a beggar like Chen? There was no doubt about it. Once the star realizes it, it will only aggravate their situation. It will be much more painful to fall after a while. Shiku and they had already had lunch and were ready to separate. The girl was sitting in the car and asked the boy if he suddenly had something else and needed it. With her help, I could call her at any time. Now I had to go to work. He said they would when he got home. At the event, the boy briefly agreed and wondered, because what the girl said seemed like they were going to return to the same house. He himself was outside. Suddenly the phone rang and immediately answered the voice of the soul girl. Shu said that the banquet that was discussed yesterday will start soon. The girl asked him if he needed it. Escalation he accepted. He said that it is now at the crossroads of Easter and the spring, adding that there is still a Chinese restaurant in this place. The girl asked the protagonist if he would like to dress up a little and buy clothes. She could take it, however. The guy refused because it seemed like it would be too much trouble. After that, he asked her if Miss Shou thought she didn't seem suitable for this party. Shu said that this couldn't be because an honored guest from his family arrived. Of course you can use what? Do. After that, he asked Chen to wait for a while. In 10 minutes, she would be there, and Chen briefly agreed. After a while, the banquet began at the Full Moon Palace Hotel. Lush arrived at the hotel accompanied by Yule. He looked around, imagining now the most luxurious hotel. It seems that the girl turned to her companion telling him how amazing he was, because he was even invited to banquets of such influential families as the Ixu family, while answering what could not be otherwise. Form. Because he himself means something while his father occupies his present position. Suddenly, the girl saw Chen sitting on a chair. He immediately recognized him from behind. They were both surprised that this guy would get here. They were interested in the question of how he had gotten here. And Chilla decided that the protagonist could have come here with what? And the girl told the one who this afternoon star provided a service, saving the company 500,000, so she may have brought him with her to this banquet. The guy said that it was out of the question, that he would be embarrassed if he joined, and she concluded that he definitely slipped in here without an invitation. And the Chi suddenly screamed, pointing her finger at Chen. She began to ask where the guards were. When the dogs began to be allowed to enter the Palace of the Full Moon, he demanded that they be expelled as soon as possible. The guards arrived. They couldn't believe that someone had the guts to sneak in. Full Moon. Chen had 2 guards behind him. He didn't understand what was going on. When he also shouted, asking, I found who he thinks he is, and told him that I knew this beggar because they were from the same university. The guy said that Prota came in here uninvited and demanded that he be kicked out of here. One of the guards said the allegations were clearly not unfounded. The man asked the presenting protagonist of his invitation, otherwise they would be forced to ask him to leave this place. And Chen happily replied that, and I had come here with Shu, and I hadn't heard of the invitation. As he looked at the protagonist sitting down, he asked, how could a loser think he was worthy of saying it out loud? And Chico put his arms around his chest and said that at least Chen could have done it. He made up a more plausible lie. Do you really think you got clients right away? Just for the sake of getting along with a celebrity? The guard changed to a high pitch. He said Siri couldn't present the invitation, so he shouldn't blame loss because of their lack of education. After that, the show appeared in the hall. He became angry and ordered everyone to stop, immediately saying that anyone who dares to talk to Chen like this will consider him his enemy. People began to stutter as they pronounced his name.